Usa la conciencia, mi hermano. No la dejes que se te duerma. No la dejes que muera. Jamás. ¡Ah!
Well, blessings. I am so happy that I am joined by some wonderful men with us. We wanted to talk about Hispanic Heritage Month. With a population that is more than 60.6 million, equivalent to 18.5% of the entire population of the United States, Latinos in our culture are creating an everyday life and popular culture through music, through food, dance, but we also find them in science, art, economics, politics, and other fields. Latinos have contributed and continue to contribute exponentially to the development of the United States. And that is why year after year, we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. Now, the question that I want to expand on today is, but do we really know the story behind this celebration? We're actually celebrating the history and the countless, can I just expand on that and repeat that again? The countless of contributions that Latinos have made to this nation for over years. And this month, we also honor the richness of Hispanics who come from Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. In a recent conversation that I had with Reverend Jacob and my brother Louis, we were talking about our concerns. We summarized the concern for our generation. We are seeing that our mothers, our grandmothers, passing away. And I don't know about you, but this concerns me because they were the ones who mended that tradition and culture within us, with the food, with the gatherings, with the music. And all of that is fading away. And we're seeing a younger generation that is rising who is totally disconnected from their culture, their traditions, and their heritage. We are all concerned of the lack of preservation in America of our Latino culture and heritage. So I want to individually ask each of you to first tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? And secondly, why are you concerned? We'll start with Reverend Jacob.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. As Bishop Williams said, I am Reverend Jacob, priest within the CEEC under the Diocese of Christ Good Shepherd. And I am the canon missioner of the Order of St. Martin de Porres, which is a socio-religious order centered on social and racial justice within the city of Boston and beyond. Concerning this conversation, I have various concerns that come from me being an Afro-Latino and being part of this community. One being purposeful suppression of Hispanic culture reflected in our youth in hopes to avoid the stigmas and the racism that many of our parents and our ancestors faced when they first arrived in the United States. Another concern is the continual stripping of things such as our culture and our language, which leads to the inability to go and connect with the very communities in which our roots are found in. We are unable to go through our own pilgrimages of self-discovery because we lack the tools in order to be able to connect with our own motherland. We have lost chapters of history that can be found within the countless stories and experiences that our ancestors held as they continue to die. And so with them die those lessons and the fruits for which they lived and died for. Many of our Afro-Latino brothers continue to lose the fabrics of their identity, not only at the hands of colonialism, but due to the lack of the very preservation of our culture. Many of us have been stripped of our identities. In my personal encounter and embarking in my own journey of self-discovery, I experienced a purposeful erasure of my history as an Afro-Latino at the hands of slavery and white supremacy. The acknowledgement that points of my key identity, my last name, are handed down to me because it was handed down by a slave owner. So my own identity, the fabric of who I am, lacks to be in myself. I am in this place of confusion and lack of identity because our history has not been preserved accurately. And this is at the hand of our history being villainized, our history being ostracized, our history being deemed barbaric, while in reality, our history is full of leaders. It's full of visionaries, of pioneers, of philosophers, of doctors, of theologians, of kings and queens and medics and healers. Our history has been villainized. And because our history has been villainized, our only response is to let go of the very fabrics that unified us. See, the terminology of Hispanic or Latino has nothing to do with race, but it has everything to do with ethnicity. And for those who don't know what ethnicity is, it is the fact or state of being within a social group that has common national and cultural traditions. But how can we claim this ethnicity when our own history is being erased on a daily basis?
Louis, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and explain to us, why are you concerned?
Well, I don't know how anybody's supposed to follow that. You know what I mean? But my name's Luis Rivera. I am your common man. I am a contractor in the city of Boston. I have lived here most of my life. I've been fortunate enough to have traveled various amount of states throughout the United States. I want to say a good 24 of them. So, yeah, I've experienced different things as a Latino in and around the U.S. I've experienced how our cultures can be misconstrued. I've experienced how our cultures can be accepted, how people can be naive towards certain things that they might not understand, whether it be because of some of the food that we eat or how different our cultures can be, right? My concern lies in a lot of what Jacob had to say, which is all boils down to identity. I feel like our identity is defined by what people's stigmas is of Hispanics. You know, all you ever seen on every single Fast and the Furious movie is Hector, right? At the end of the day, it took getting all the way to the popularity where reggaeton started being, for them to introduce another form of Latino into that big budget Hollywood. You get what I'm saying? Us Latinos, we come from different parts of the world, from all over and different kind of places, that even the closest places to each other, like La República Dominicana, like Puerto Rico and Cuba, we're still completely three different cultures. And we identify ourselves differently. We speak differently. We cook differently. Man, we even listen to music different. Have you listened to Debo? I can't. That's a joke. But I I am afraid of always being the culture that is always being generalized or lost in the shuffle. That's what I'm afraid of the most. I am afraid of falling into the pit that unfortunately a lot of my other neighbored cultures come from. See, because people just want to call black people from the Caribbean black people from the Caribbean, but we got Barbados. You get what I'm saying? We have Haiti, we have Jamaica, and all these places are completely different from each other. And this is what I'm trying to say. I don't see it in our face. It isn't advertised to us. Even, and I like to correct something you said earlier about the percentages. One of those percentages is actually wrong because when they take the census, they count every light Latino as white. So our full numbers aren't accounted for even here in our home country, the US. And those are the points I'm trying to make. Those are my concerns. I feel like we are too generalized, and I feel like there are different cultures that can be exposed. I don't feel like I've ever seen a Puerto Rican ever say bendición in a movie. How's that? You know, it's the small things, it's the little things that we can all identify with that I feel aren't put out there, and people will never accept who we are as a people if they don't understand how many different cultures makes us. Thank you.
I want to expand a little bit on something you said. I had a conversation with my wife not too long ago because I went to Colombia, and in Colombia, it is a sacred thing that the son or the grandson, they do not leave the house until they get blessed by their mother. And it boggled my mind because vocationally, that is only attached to me by my vocation to either the priesthood or the bishopric. But it actually has been so traditionally in our culture where we see that the mother or the father of the house has this powerful entity or identity that God has given them to be able to bless our life. And it was interesting. It shocked me. And so I see it, how it's fading away. Our kids no longer say bendición. Now my kids call me and say, "What's up, bro?" So it is truly a concern because we are not informed as to why we say bendición and why we do not walk away until they say Dios te bendiga. Xavier, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are concerned.
So I'm also a common man, like Brother Lewis over here. My name is Xavier Medina. I am a jack of all trades, I might say. I've been a trucker. Right now I'm doing a maintenance tech. I'm a videographer, a photographer, a graphic designer. I do that freelance. I do a lot of different things. I've also traveled around the U.S., like Lewis said, seen a lot of places. And I was a youth pastor for about 7 years as well. Was a mentor for even longer to young kids that I would meet, some in the street, some in church, some, just by mutual friends. And for some reason, I always gravitate youth towards me. So I think it was just part of my calling. That's a part of who I am. And I'm always looking to help people. That's just me at my core. So as far as the concerns go, I think my main concern with our heritage and culture is that, in agreement with what Reverend Jacob was saying and what Lewis was saying, is to say it in the simplest form, it's being watered down. It's being watered down every generation. And it's kind of like what Father David was saying. It's like, you remember like your grandmother, had all the respect in the house. Like nobody could say anything bad to your grandmother, or you might get a chancletazo from across the room. It's those things that's like that reverence that we had. It is dwindling away, not only in our households, in our families, but all over our culture. And it's funny because I have friends who are Puerto Rican, or they might be Mexican, or even Dominican, who don't speak any Spanish at all. And that's become the norm amongst millennials. And you have to imagine this next generation coming after us that's already here and present, they're speaking even less Spanish. They're not holding on to our own language, which is almost the most sacred thing you can say about us, So to be Latino and not to even, speak your native tongue, it's almost shameful, but people are more ashamed of not being able to speak English versus being able to speak Spanish. You know what I mean? So a lot of Latinos take shame in the fact that they can't speak English, and they only know Spanish, or they have a thick accent. I can't tell you how many people I've met that are afraid to speak English because of their accent, and that's mainly my concern. And I think a lot of it is coming from pop culture, in my opinion. Yes, it does come from racial inequality. Yes, it does come from segregation. Yes, it does come from many decades and centuries before what we're experiencing now. But I think right now, what's the biggest influence amongst our people and amongst millennial generation, who are the adults right now, right? We've grown up and now we're adulting. We have all the jobs, right? We are the police officers. We are the educators. We are the religious leaders in our communities. We are all these things now. This millennial generation has grown up and now is taking care of business or not taking care of it, you know. So pop culture has such a major influence over us, and I feel like that's a big part of it. And in our music, in what we see on TV, in every aspect of our life, we see pop culture. And here in America, it's such a strong culture. Like, you hear the term Americanized all the time thrown around loosely. And it's very true. Like, when you come to America, you are taught to assimilate to American culture instantly. The second you arrive here, if you want to be a citizen, you have to know stuff about the United States and memorize it and know it in your heart. You need to know there's 50 stars on the flag. You need to know there's 13 stripes. You know what I mean? So they start teaching you the facts, but little by little, they start teaching you the actions. They start teaching you the reaction, how you're supposed to talk, how you're supposed to eat, how you're supposed to, your sleeping patterns, your working patterns. Everybody has a 9 to 5 in America, you know? So all of that stuff is just thrown on you. And this is the melting pot, and it melts parts of our culture away. It melts parts of who we are, parts of our heritage, parts of what we were taught already. Like Father David was saying, like, it's rare that you hear youth now say bendición to their parents or their grandparents, you know. I was taught and raised that, you know, anybody who's older than me, I have to say it to, period, you know. And now, like, kids don't do that. Kids don't do that at all. So, but definitely, I think pop culture plays such a strong part in dwindling down our heritage and our culture, because the culture in America is like as seen on TV culture, you know, whatever your kids are listening to, that's what they're going to do. And I think the voice of the Latino has been silenced for many years. And this is not something that just started happening. It's been happening gradually over the years. And it's like Lewis was saying, even the statistics on how many of us there are not accurate. You know, that's crazy to even, I didn't know that, you know, it's crazy to even hear that. So a lot of times we don't think about it, and we're not intentional about our actions. And I feel like that's what causes our heritage and our culture to kind of just slip out the back door while we're letting in all this new culture.
Wonderful, wonderful. Reverend Josue, please introduce yourself with that shirt, amazing shirt. Introduce yourself and tell us, why are you concerned?
Grace and peace, everyone. My name is Reverend Sway Rosario Calise. I am a priest in the Diocese of the Good Shepherd and the Communion of Evangelical Episcopal Churches. And thank you, Your Grace, Bishop William Nunez. Just to let you know, this came directly from Ghana, West Africa, when I went there to go visit them, and it was an amazing time. I do want to start off by saying that I want to, with love, correct my two brothers. You are not common folk. According to 1 Peter 2:9, you are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. You are kings amongst the masses. So I want to make sure that you are understanding that when you are speaking, that there is so much power in what it is that you're saying. And as Latino men, we have this this grace upon us, right? And this a power that comes with us, that we empower the next generation and we empower the households, right? And so I always want to make sure that you recognize that you are those kings amongst the masses, and that royal priests are chosen by God. And so moving into the question that Your Grace, that you asked, it's a very loaded question, and I think that my brothers have done such an amazing job answering this question, because they touch on everything.
But you have to talk. You have to tell us a little bit about yourself, man. We want to hear what you've been doing, because it's been wonderful.
So I currently I'm in Tennessee, y'all. Down south, down yonder. I've never been a southern person. I've never been down south. This is before. Listen, I've never thought that I was going to be below the Mason-Dixon line, but here we are. And so I am currently the Dean for Community Standards here at Sewanee, the University of the South. And it's been a very interesting journey. I'm handling a lot of community standards work here within the university and talking about interfaith work, right? A lot of times when we talk about interfaith in a collegial setting, right? We start thinking that it's just Christianity, and the truth is, right? And then on top of it just being Christianity, it is a Eurocentral or a white version of what Christianity is. And the reality is that our population, the Blacks and the Latinos, right? We are a fast growing population, and we are used to a very charismatic style service that a lot of the services that are provided within the collegial settings are not meeting the needs, the spiritual needs of our youth, of our students. And on top of that, when there are opportunities for us to bring charismatic representations of spirituality within campus, we forget about those subsections of individuals that practice ancestral spirituality. When they think about the Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Cuban and Santeria, right, or Lukumi, which is modern day Santeria, right, we neglect completely that side, right? When we think about some of our students who are Black and Latino who identify as Muslim, right? We neglect that as well. And so I've been working a lot with trying to bring interfaith, true interfaith and expressions and access, equity and access to spirituality in the campus. That's a little briefing of who I am. I kind of want to touch briefly on some of these points because my brothers have already mentioned them. We are a fast growing population, one of the fastest growing populations here, the Latino culture. But we are one of the least represented in a lot of different areas, including high level positions in different organizations. So when people speak about a glass ceiling, it's like we can see it, but we never reach those levels, right? And so the unequitable distribution of access and access to certain opportunities and to certain positions and to certain advancement, the gentrification of our neighborhoods, all that is completely real. And that is something that worries me and concerns me as an Afro-Latino male as well. Another point that came across was from our Latino stories, right? As Brother Xavier said, we are somewhat forced to assimilate, right, to American culture. But I also want to be mindful that sometimes it is our own people that make us assimilate because they make us feel that the only way that we can advance and move up and go forward is if we assimilate to that culture. And so sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by telling the future generation, do not speak Spanish everywhere you go. You need to fix your accent whenever you go. If you have a little hood in your throat, you got to control that and you got to code switch, right? And so sometimes our own people are making us assimilate, right? And for me, it's flabbergasting because if we have a white individuals who are making us want to assimilate, and then if we try to find refuge in our own people, but our own people is saying, no, wait a minute, you're gonna have to calm it down and you're gonna have to do what the white people are telling you to do, then we are stripping away from our Latino heritage, right? Which is causing the bigger stigma and the bigger problem in our neighborhoods. Another thing is, as my brother Lewis and Father Jacob has stated, is the intersectionality of our identities, right? And understanding what Afro-Latino is, right? And understanding how Blackness really plays a role into our Latinidad or our form of Latinidad, right? And sometimes when we think about our Blackness, right, then we have the white Latinos who are saying, well, you can't be Black because you're Latino. And if you're Latino, you need to choose whether you're Black or Latino. And then you have our Black counterparts who say, well, wait a minute, well, you're not Black enough because you're Latino. And so then we are stuck in this intersection and in this hardship of our intersectionality where we're like, okay, well, we don't belong here and we don't belong here. Where do we belong, right? So these are all areas of concerns that really are affecting me, which is the reason why my entire dissertation for my doctoral program is based on understanding the intersectionality of our identities and being able to be fruitful in our identities and not strip away from them.
Man, oh man. I'm so glad I called you late minute. I want us to really, because I had a following question, but I want to get to this one because I think it's important. And I want you to really ponder on it and be as honest as possible. We'll start with Reverend Jacob, but what are some of the shifts you believe should take place in our Latino communities in order to safeguard and to preserve our culture and heritage through the generations to come? Reverend Jacob.
Definitely. I think one of the big steps that we need to do is to begin our ancestral pilgrimage, to begin what it is, that journey of understanding where we come from, to begin to understand that we are an amalgamation of different races, of different contexts, of different continents. As Father Sway was saying, we are not a monolith. There are, Latinos that are considered Asian. There are in those same journeys. And so some of the safeguards that we need to do is to return to our traditions, to return to the very things that made us Hispanic and made us Latino, Latina, and Latinx, depending on how you identify within gender. We need to return to those things. We need to begin having our dialogues at the kitchen tables like we used to, having those tough dinners and those awkward conversations. They might not be as fruitful as we want them to be, but they need to be had. We need to start asking those questions because it is within those conversations we are able to receive the cultural context to continue to move forward. We, as we said, we are losing the precious thing that is our tongue. I am blessed to have a mother that forced upon me to learn this language because it has allowed me to continue my pilgrimage when it comes to what it means to be Afro-Latino. There are various chapters that our youth will never be able to engage with because they have lost the tongue to be able to go into these countries, to be able to go into these places and learn about their history. So we need to return to what it is, what that familial bendición, all of those things that we have lost along the way in order to become more Americanized. Because in the beginning, it was because of the fears of stigma and racism, but now we lose them to the benefits that we have to be able to thrive within the society. That is why we are so willing and so giving to our culture. We want to progress. We want to make it and break these glass ceilings, but we don't understand that it is our culture that serves as a ladder for us to get there. And so having those familial conversations is necessary. Understanding that our ancestors, our grandparents are actually books that we are meant to read. They're full of life lessons that we are meant to be learned. Those who do not learn their history are bound to repeat it over and over and over again. Many of the issues that we are facing today, our ancestors faced years ago and have solutions for and have techniques to guide us with. Many of the things, our health concerns, can be solved by our medics, by what used to be healers in our communities. Those house remedies. I know that when I had COVID, my mother came up with some remedies with onions and apples and herbs. And trust me, those worked. Those helped. And it is the loss of those things because we want to be accepted by a society that will never accept this culture. It is like Father Sway said, it is a melting pot that instinctively melts part of your identity in order for you to be able to assimilate. But what we need to understand is that the language, our very own language, is the second most predominant language in this country. Second or third, if I'm not mistaken. And our communities are economic lines of wealth in this country. We have built this country as well. It is our colmados, it is our bodegas, our barbershops that have given to this community, that have pushed forward. It is leaders like Cesar Chavez that pushed for workers' rights, that fought for LGBTQ rights in the 70s and 60s and 80s. And so understanding that and gravitating back towards those traditions, back towards those things, even if we do it in a cultural context of modernizing it, even if we, as we believe within the CEC and our convergence movement, how can be contextual. We can be contextual within our culture without losing the traditions that made us us. And so those are the steps we need to take. It is those very uncomfortable conversations that need to take place. It is those very hard journeys of learning one's ancestry, of going back and understanding where our surnames come from, what our ancestors passed through, what that meant, the fight that they fought, the life that they lived. That has allowed us to be here today. And the neglect of that will only cause for us to repeat the mistakes which have led us to be here in the first place.
Wonderful, wonderful. Brother Lewis.
So, and I know I'm supposed to be answering a question right now, but in my experience and my profession now, I have to do a lot of forward thinking. So in order for me to prep my entire staff, who sums up about 200 to 300 people in a day, I have to make sure that the month is prep prior, the 6 months of prep prior, the year is prep prior in certain situations. My point is that I'm a thinker of forward thinking, and that's why I love like Peter from the Bible. You know this, right? Peter was always a forward thinker. I believe that Peter knew that his bones were going to let people like live like well off all that, right? Because Peter was just that good. And what I learned from Peter's community, Peter didn't want the gift just for himself. You get what I'm saying? He it took so much for him to get to where he was at that he appreciated it so much that he wanted to give it forward. So, and I believe that our people are very much the same, right? We are very given people, which is, I mean, we can talk about Christopher Columbus and all that, but everybody knows the story. That's how giving we are. Okay, we almost lost an entire island to a genocide. You know what I mean? So, what has happened since that genocide is that we've all spread out, and then particularly talking about Puerto Ricans and everyone else, excuse me for a second, but Puerto Ricans particularly, we spread out in so many different places, and we've kept so many of our traditions. But the same way that we've kept our traditions, we've also adopted new ones, right? And I feel like a lot of the new issues that we have is us accepting some of these new traditions that have been made. See, because we do talk about the bendición, and and Lord knows, I kick my nephew in the head every time he doesn't say it. You know what I mean? But there are these new traditions these kids are coming up with. Like these kids respect each other on a level that, okay, they're where we met on a stoop. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. We would spend from 9 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning just talking and talking and talking with our friends, doing what we did. But we did that all night long for 6 hours. Now these kids do it through a video game. Right? They have their own communities and they build their own communities. They communicate through these things. And the thing is that, where I feel like there does still need to be a certain amount of control, we also have to learn to understand their methods. We also need to learn how to bring a new message, because that's what Peter did. He worked along different communities. And the thing is that a lot of the times it's us not wanting to adapt to what we see in front of us. And to try to continue to go against the grain, it's never going to work. Eventually, just like cheese, you get cut. And that, I feel like that's to the Latinos' detriment. I feel like there you have people like most of us who are in the middle, who grew up with with the right side, very strong conservative Latinos who, like was mentioned earlier, that kind of forced us to say, hey, no, leave that accent at home. All right, leave those cultures at home. The fact that we did it to ourselves. We were the ones complaining because mom gave us rice and beans to go on the field trip. Right? Same idea. So I feel like where it needs to shift is us learning to adopt certain new traditions, these traditions that are coming up now, being able to understand these new Latinos that are coming up, and being able to accept that we're all not the same Latinos. I'll go back to that again. I feel like where the shift needs to happen is that we need to be more culturally aware. Coming from somebody who has literally traveled the goods and bads of the United States, Southern California is very different from Northern California. All right. Northern California is very different from Baltimore. Baltimore is very different from Orlando. And what I'm trying to say is that in these places, I ran into cultures that had Mexicans, a lot of them. I ran into cultures that have a lot of Salvadorians. I've had run into cultures that have a lot of Dominicans. We all are different people. I think that if we learn to, instead of trying to push away what these cultures are and actually lean towards them and try to learn from each other, that we actually make these changes that we're looking for, that people would then further understand who we actually are. But it needs to come from us. We need to unite as communities. That's it. That's what I got.
Wonderful. We'll go to Xavier, but I just want to contribute my point on this one. Because though I agree with you, Brother Lewis, that we should adapt and we shouldn't neglect that Latinos are becoming different than what we were. I think that we have to create a path back to the tradition of the table. And I'm not talking about the Eucharist. I'm talking about our Latino tradition of being able to sit down and receive and give what our grandparents, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, our mothers had. You received not only tradition and heritage, you received education, you received information, education, counsel, advice. And I think that if we don't go back to those essential things that made us who we are today, then we lose the balance, because it's good to adapt. If we don't adapt, then we'll forever be in the back. But there has to be a balance of also allowing our or showing our kids and the next generation to come that these small things of just sitting as a family at the table are very important and will shape the future of each and all of us. And so I think that if there has to be a shift, it has to be towards the tradition of the table where voices are heard. I think that our voices have somewhat become a fade away echo. And I get so emotional because I know that my parents are close to that ending point. I have to become knowledgeable of this reality. They're not going to be eternal. And so am I contributing as a father something that can safeguard and preserve that heritage? Well, in the struggle of this nation, where we are pushed to work and work and work and work and work, I am not, to be honest with you. I come home, I rush and eat, go and study, then I say goodnight to them. And so I think that the shift should lead us back to the simplest tradition. We all sit at the table. Let's all have a meal together. Let's converse together and let our voices be heard together so that our kids can also understand that they do have a voice and not obey or submit to the fact of this society that is teaching us that we don't have one. No, we do have a voice, but we have to lead towards that route. Xavier, please, what shift do you think should take place?
I agree with everything that all of you guys have said. I think the main thing is that we need to be intentional, and I feel like a lot of us have just grown up and stopped being intentional with what we do. That passion, that fire that sparked us to even, be something and do something with our lives. It comes from our history. A lot of it comes from, I saw mommy have to pay all the bills by herself, and I come from a home where my dad wasn't there. So then single mom struggles. That's almost every Latino family that you probably know. Like the majority of us come from broken homes. So when you look at that and then look at what the motivation is behind, what makes you get up every day, what makes you work, what makes you hustle, what makes you get out there, there's passion, and there's pain and there's struggle and strife that we went through that motivates us. It's the same concept, but in a different context. We need to understand our history. We know our personal history. I know mommy's struggle. I know my dad wasn't always there. I know, all of my cousins and stuff, we all lived in one house at one point. You know what I mean? Like Latino struggles. So I know my struggle, but if I don't know my history, if I'm not educated on where I come from as a people, not only as a Puerto Rican, but as a Latino, it's important to know your counterpart's struggles too. Because how can we stand united if we don't know each other's past? If we don't know all the commonalities that actually do exist between us, but because of lack of education, lack of understanding of each other's cultures and heritage, we don't assimilate or come together as a community of Latinos where our voice can be heard as a whole. Yes, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans. Yes, there's a lot of Dominicans. Yes, there's a lot of Mexicans. But how much more powerful of a voice would we have if we can come together? If we can all come together? And there is so much that has been silenced and divided amongst us. I mean, you even looking at like the Black Lives Matter movement. I know me and Father Jacob have talked about this plenty of times. A lot of times there is that divide where it's like, Black people are like, nah, you guys aren't one of us. And then like white people or white Latinos are on the same boat. It's like, no, but you're really not one of us in the middle either. So the same thing happens with our Latino counterparts where it's like, all right, Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. I'm Puerto Rican, don't call me Mexican. How many times have you heard that or said that? Let's be real. Don't lie. Jacob, how many times they told you, yo, you Puerto Rican, but you Dominican as they come, and you make that mangu like nobody else I know, right? So, but we take offense. We take offense, and because we're so prideful to be our heritage and culture, but we don't want to take acceptance amongst the Latino heritage and culture as a whole. Yeah, we're different. Like Lewis was saying, we're very different. Our cultures are very different. And it should offend you if somebody generalizes you as one culture or heritage that is not what you are. But it shouldn't offend you when someone does it innocently. If someone does it from a stereotypical standpoint, I understand. But if someone does it innocently, we still have that pride. So we have pride with our own heritage a lot of times. We have pride with our own culture. But when it comes to being Latinos as a whole, we don't stand together. A lot of times we don't. And that's what needs to change. I feel like that shift needs to happen in our communities where Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Venezuelans and Colombians all come together and can be at the same protest, can be at the same Sunday service, can be at the same table having communion.
Wonderful. Reverend Josue.
It's interesting because I don't have much to add because every point that I had was already spoken. Number one, Your Grace, very prophetic with the table. I know that you said that this wasn't about the Eucharist, but that we should come back to the table and eat as a family. But it is really at the table, no matter how you look at it, whether it is prophetic or it is the Eucharist table, whether it is not, it is at the table where your differences are put aside and you come in there for a purpose, and that is to be fed, whether it's to be fed here or here, right? And so I kind of wanted to just mention that because I almost shouted when you said that. I think that one of the things that I want to see in the shift is breaking some of the stigmas. And some of those stigmas are, dancing, music, bomba y plena, right? For a lot of individuals who come from the Pentecostal background or more conservative Christianity, any type of dancing and music that is considered secular or not Christian at all is completely wrong, right? And so we kind of strip away from our roots, and who we are as Latinos by stripping away some of those access to some of that stuff and the understanding behind that. And it's not just only, having access to dancing and music, but understanding the roots, right? What does every drum signify? Where did every drum come from? Where did bomba en plena come from? Where did that style of dancing that started with our African slaves, right?
Oh, please, Rev, we don't want to start Lewis with this conversation.
Oh, I've been saying I know on mute for forever right now.
And so, understanding, these rich traditions, right? And I want to skip to that because when we're talking about understanding the root of it, let's talk about food, right? Understanding where did the caldero of rice come from, that it's found in every single Puerto Rican and Dominican household, every single Cuban household, right? There is a caldero of rice, right? Where did that come from? How is it that we can have many pots and pans, but the only one that we choose to use rice in is in that caldero of pot, right? What is the significance of that? Understanding the foods and spices, right? Some of these shifts that we need to do, and I know that I'm speaking too deep, right? But sometimes it's the very small things that we need to get deeper in so that we can understand where we come from, right? And some of it is understanding cultural and historic significance of foods, rice, foods and spices. Gordon Ramsay made a video not too long ago, and he made pegao, and he talking, we're going to show you how to make Puerto Rican pegao, and you're going to take the rice and you're going to get the cast iron skillet and you put some oil, let it get real hot, and then you put the rice in there, your leftover rice in there. And it was like, what, bruh? If you don't make the pegao as you're making your rice, like I'm confused as to how you are not making your pegao as you're making your rice. The leftovers have nothing to do with it, right?
But okay.
And then one of the other shifts that I want to see, and I'll be quick with it, is you're absolutely right. The respect for elders, right? And the respect for your parents. My nephews and my nieces, they better say bendición to me when I can walk into the room, right? There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? My mother would walk in, and if I didn't say bendición, she'd be like, ¿Qué? ¿Dormiste conmigo anoche? Right? And so, you instill these small little things on them, and it's understanding that this is cultural norms that we have to continue moving forward and perpetuating forward so that our generations can understand. And then going back to the intersectionality of who we are and our identities as American, because all of us 5 individuals in here, we are American now, right? So as American, we need to understand a pledge allegiance to the flag. But then as Puerto Ricans or as Latinos, we need to understand our own. So for Puerto Ricans, we need to understand La tierra de Borinquen, donde nacido yo, right? That is as important for us to know as an I pledge of allegiance to the flag, right? Because that's all a part of who we are. So the shifts is, let's not only teach our children that you put your hands over your heart when you see the Pledge of Allegiance, but also in your house, show them En mi viejo San Juan, show them La tierra de Borinquen, show them all these rich cultural significant movements that happen that all have meaning to it. And then, as our brother said, allowing our generations to speak Spanish, right? Allow them to be able to have that their native tongue, so that when they are able to go to to their pilgrimages back, as Father Jacob said, back to our native countries, that they can communicate with those individuals there. And if they're already grown and we already missed the mark, right? Letting them understand, it is all right, because it does not make you any less Latino because you don't speak Spanish. And that's a stigma that I want to break, right? That, because you don't speak Spanish doesn't make you less Latino, because your Latino stories is uniquely it, right? So if you don't speak Latino and you feel half-baked, that is a Latino experience and a Latino story, that it is as valid as me speaking Spanish and growing up in Carolina and down in Ponce and having, alcapurrias coming outside of school in Puerto Rico, right? And then finally, as my brother Xavier said, is the fights between Latinos, right? Don't get me wrong. Don't call me a Mexican. I'm not Mexican whatsoever. I don't look Mexican. I am not Mexican. Call me Dominican if you want to call me something else. Call me Cuban, right? Any Caribbean country, I'm down for it, right? But don't call me anything else, right? Understand, like I think that if people understand, and this is education for white folk, right? Is understanding. Don't just generalize us, as Xavier said. And then one of the biggest shifts that I want to see is the independence, true independence, or lack of dependence of our countries to white countries, right? I think that most of our countries have big dependencies on the big, big brother America, right? We all have that dependence, right? So if we can finally get some dependence from that, I think that would be great, which is a little difficult when America has allowed us or created structures and systematic oppression that makes us bound to them. So one of the things that I want to see is that shift coming out of it, and we can break systematic. Let's create systematic changes that would allow us to really flourish. That was it.
I don't want to drag this subject too much, but I'm sorry. I have to make this contribution as a bishop. I think that our Latino churches have to shift. There has to be a shift. You use us for charismatic preaching. You use us for charismatic singing. But we have to contribute to preserve and safeguard who we are. You cannot motivate without self-awareness. I cannot feel motivated to achieve anything if I am not aware of who I am. And so can we contribute more sermons that have to deal more with how we're being oppressed, with our, as we say, as the Latino says, la vida cotidiana, the daily issues that we deal with, the daily struggles that we deal with, the single mothers, our heritage, our culture, our traditions. We need to contribute more in our churches because we're not doing so. So I just wanted to make that clear. We can start, actually, I don't know if Reverend Josue is willing to start this one of our last conversations, and then we'll watch a brief clip and finalize. But share with us a Latino or Latina that has inspired you and makes you feel proud of being a Latino. Reverend Josue.
So this is it's kind of hard, right? And I'm gonna say that I'm gonna mention both my mom and my dad, right, who's no longer with us, both of them. And my mother, because she is a very strong Latina woman, Afro-Latina woman. She comes from rich Blackness in Latinidad, and she made us aware every step of the way that we are Puerto Rican, that we are African, and that we should be proud of it. Whenever someone would try to break our Latinidad down, she would come in and she would fight for us. I remember a time when we were about 5 years old. I was about 6 or 7. And the bus driver told us that we couldn't speak Spanish. My mom was there that very afternoon. She was up there and she almost beat the lights out of this driver. And she said, "My kids are Puerto Rican. Their language is Spanish, and they're going to keep on speaking Spanish, and you are never going to stop them from speaking Spanish." Right? The amount of confidence that she had in herself as a Latina woman, no one could tell her nothing. Right? And she fought for herself. She fought for her family. She fought for her kids. She fought for her grandkids all the way until the very end. She was a fighter. And so she is one of those women who made me proud to be a Latino, as well as my father who's no longer with us as well. Who I am, right? I always say that I'm a mix of my mom and my dad, right? My mom taught me how to do everything good. In the house, my dad told me how to work on them cars, how to work inside the house, how to be a man, how to open doors for women, how to stand up when a woman comes to the table, how to stand up when they decide to leave the table, how they should be the ones that are guarding, you know, everything. And so for me, I really want to point out just my parents, my mother and my father, for being just strong representation of what Latino excellence is.
Wonderful. Brother Jacob.
Thank you so much. I definitely follow along the same trajectory as Father Josue. You know, my mother was instilling in us very much the importance of being Hispanic and being part of the culture, so much so that, you know, every time she went to the Dominican Republic, she'd bring back what we know as the nacho books, and she'd force us to sit about 2 to 3 hours every night and learn the language, learn how to write, learn how to read in those languages. But in, you know, even deeper in the religious sense, I have someone who has been of guidance, and who me and Bishop David named the order after, which is St. Martin de Porres. And a lot of people don't know who this individual is. So I'll give you guys a little history, a little context, but then I'll give you one of the best quotes that I have been able to get from him, something that still inspires me till today. So St. Martin de Porres was born in Lima, Peru, to a Spanish gentleman and a freed slave from Panama. But as the time went, he was negated by his Spanish father and raised by his single mother, a story that a lot of us within our context can claim and see ourselves in. So he grew up, you know, in deep poverty, another thing which our community understands a little too well. But after spending so much time in school learning to be a barber surgeon, he entered the laity, another thing that is very similar to my story. And after his years of service, because it was years of service, because he was not able to become a lay minister due to what? His race, his color, the color of his skin, something that also unifies our struggle, that struggle that we face as Hispanics and Latinos, that is often rooted within also the color of our skin. And that's another conversation on colorism that we can intertwine with this as well. But after so many years of devotion to a Dominican convent in the convent of the Rosary in Lima, Peru, he was eventually able to become a lay minister, even through the opposition of many of his white counterparts. And he had the privilege of serving his community, known as the patron saint of mixed races, of barbers, of social justice, because within his heart, within what led him, within his cultural context, he understood the value of community. He understood the value of the table. He understood the value of serving the least of these. So much so that this is where one of my favorite quotes comes from. In the convent, there was a specific issue where a lot of the people in the convent became ill. And in one occasion, he went in through the locked doors to care for the sick. And he was corrected. They pulled him into the office and said, "You aren't supposed to do it." And he said, "Forgive me for my error, and please instruct me, for I did not know that the precept of obedience took over the precedence of charity." That mindset of understanding that within the context that he came from, within his culture, it was about community. It was about charity. It was about loving your neighbor as you love yourself. Many of the things that our Hispanic cultures are enamored with, many of the things that our traditions come from, was coming from those mindsets and those concepts. And we, through the lack of understanding our history, lose pillars like him within our community, lose those life lessons, lose those key instructions, because we don't take the time to go back to our past. We think that it is all in what can come to the future, but it is those key leaders, philosophers, kings and queens who laid the seeds to the fruits that we're bearing today. We don't even know where these fruits are coming from. And we bear the benefits of them because of the sacrifices of individuals like St. Martin de Porres, who lived and died a life of charity, who lived and embodied what it meant to be a person of mixed races, who identified as a Latino, who identified as Hispanic, and who understood that our plights connect us. Our races may divide us, but our plights connect us. The fact that we are together on this pilgrimage towards justice, we must understand that that connects us. The social justice issues for the Black community are the same for the Hispanic community, are the same for the Cubans, are the same for the Colombians, are the same for the Chileans. And the moment that we understand this is the moment we will be able to leave the precedent of the divide and conquer mentality that this nation has thrived under for so many years. That is why we neglect to accept commonalities in our cultures, because we are so taught that it is divide and conquer. It is the egotistical pushing of one's race. The Dominicans don't get along with the Puerto Ricans and don't call a Dominican Black because of Dominican. And it's all of these conversations and amalgamations that we continue to repeat because we let our ancestors die in the past. We let those lessons die in the past. So for those who are listening, research St. Martin de Porres, a leader, a visionary, someone who offered a lot of lessons for us to learn, and just that same quote, forgive me, teach me, that he put people in a position where he said charity comes over the precept of obedience. Those things are what is going to continue to push us forward. It is breaking the stigmas, not only in our community but within our own minds. We have our own stigmas about ourselves. And so those ancestors will lead us to that liberation, will lead us to that freedom.
Xavier, brother Xavier.
You had to put me after Father Jacob. No, I'm just playing. But yes, I applaud all you guys because, yes, like the people who inspire us oftentimes are the people who are closest to us. And I find it personally, I was having this conversation with Bishop, I find it hard to draw inspiration from people that I don't know personally. It's hard for me to look at a political figure or even sometimes a religious leader that's just out of reach, that I don't personally know, and draw a lot of inspiration on them. But the people or the person, I have to cheat on this one because for me, it's both of my parents. And the reason both of my parents that inspire me and make me proud to be Latino, make me proud to be a Puerto Rican. And the reason I say both, I could easily choose one and go on about what they mean, but they are polar opposites. My parents are divorced since I was a little child, right? Polar opposites, but they both make up who I am. They both show me different parts of my heritage, different parts of my culture, and both sides of those families don't communicate with each other. They're not in communication, living on the opposite sides of the country, but their culture is still united. Their culture is still very similar. And even still, there's differences in the culture, even though both sides are Puerto Rican. And I say that because my mom is from the campo. My mom's like, her family grew up on a farm. She had horses. She had chickens running around. She had all that, If you're from the campo, that's what it is. My dad is like more of a city boy. And you see it in the way they live their lives years later after they met, after they had kids. And I take part in both of those. I take pride in both of those. My dad was a salsero. He used to play trumpet and he used to sing salsa and be part of a salsa band. And my mom came from a farm. Like, that's two polar opposites, but that's our culture and heritage, Yeah, Puerto Ricans assimilated a lot and we did take on a lot of American customs, but we made them our own. We took our music and their instruments and made our own, So my dad's side is like, my dad's a singer. He's a musician. All of my family on my dad's side are musicians, and that music, that Latino fuego is like burns inside of them. That makes me proud to be Puerto Rican. I show up to a party and I hear bachata on, or I hear some salsa on, or I hear any Latino music, I'm there. Shoot, I even dance to the Mexican music. I don't know what y'all talking about. I hit it off because I'm just proud to be a Latino, and that Latino, like that soul that we have in our music is amazing. And music just helps us connect with each other a lot of times. Then on my mom's side, I like to look at my mom like this, and some people may think of this as an offensive term, but it's not. Because if you know me and you know my relationship with my mom, I have the utmost respect for my mom. I admire her and I look up to her. But my mom is a simple folk. And I don't say that from a bad place at all.
My mom goes to work every day. Her main thing is to take care of the house. That's it. Always, the bills were always paid on time. Always food on the table. And that's a Latino thing, because we were cultivators first. We were gatherers, right? So, Latinos from all over the world, that's what we did. Our lands were filled with crop. Our lands were filled with riches and all this stuff. And we used that to bless each other. We used that to provide for each other. We were community-based places. We weren't thinking about dividing and conquering. We were thinking about, this is our tribe. These are our people. We need to take care of them. So I feel like I gravitate towards that a lot on my mom's side, because all of my cousins live really close to each other. It's the Latino family that, Titi lives on the first floor, Primo lives on the second floor. The third floor is rented to like the second cousin, and then next door is like the daughter. Like that's my mom's side of the family. They're really tight knit, and they're always together every holiday. And, they take joy in the simple things. Having café con leche with some pan sobao y mantequilla in the morning and talking at the table. That's my mom's side of the family, And both sides of the family are loud and like to party. But my mom's side is just a little bit more simple. And my mom herself is just such a nurturing and caring person that I see that in the Latino community. Mommy's always that person in every Latino household, right? There's always food on the table. There's always a warm meal when you come home. So both of them inspire me and make me proud to be a Latino, and they embody what a Latino is in my eyes.
Wonderful.
They embody what a Puerto Rican is.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to share this clip, and then we will start with Reverend Jacob in expressing what does the clip provoke in thoughts or emotions, so you can expand on it.
The Washington Heights of Havana, a crowd is saving faces the same as mine. But there's a child in La Vibora. I chased the birds in the plaza, praying, Mama, you would find work, calling the stars in the sky for some sort of sign. Why, Mama, so many stars in Cuba? In Nueva York, we can't see beyond our street lights. To reach the roof, you gotta bribe the sofa. Ain't no Cassiopeia in Washington Heights, but ain't no food, ain't La Vibora. In the nights, in the streets, under the windows, folding clothes, playing with my friends in the summer rain. Mama needs a job. Mama says we're poor. One day you say, vamos a Nueva York. And Nueva York was far, but Nueva York can work. And so we came. And now I'm wide awake. A million years too late. I talk to you, imagining what you do. Remembering what we went through. It wasn't like today, you'd say, my city,
So after seeing that, I think that my initial thoughts are a lot of what was represented and was that plight for trying to live in a society where you come here to thrive, but in the same sense, you miss the essence of who you were within time. I think we see that. We see her mourning a loss of something that was once so near and dear to her, in the sense of, many of our ancestors who came here didn't come here because they had an issue with the culture, or they had an issue with the community. It was the need, the dire, desperate need of survival, of economic sustainability, of guaranteeing their future, which led them towards this movement. And in that same trajectory, they see that they lose a lot of the things that made them them. She mentioned the stars, not being able to see them. And I can attest to this, as I have just come back from the islands. Seeing the culture, I felt as I didn't belong. I didn't understand the culture of the community that was mine. of the community that my parents come from. I couldn't identify myself completely with them because I just didn't understand. I didn't understand the appreciation of the nature that is had over there, of them being able to look at the stars and collect their own herbs and live amongst their animals and all of these things which made them, which made them and gave them identity, I had no connection to. And just seeing her yearn for that at an age and as a son come, realize the importance of that at such an old age now, is where many of us will find ourselves if we do not begin to have these conversations. If we don't begin to teach our children, even if they're not there, the values and the principles and the traditions that our ancestors had, they will no longer be able to connect in a true and essential way. And what we're seeing is the loss of, like I said, our identity. How can we continue to identify with our motherland when we have lost the tools needed in order to engage within that conversation? We have lost what it means to be from those places. And so it is like we said, it is a journey of balance of, yes, being able to come to this country and being able to take fruits of the freedoms that are here in a way that we do not lose that which makes us us. And we've seen examples of this. We have festivals, the Puerto Rican parade, the Dominican parade. We try to create these different ways of doing it, but there's still a lot of work to be done. There are Dominican children who are born in the United States who do not know our path of liberation in the island, who do not know where we come from, who do not know what the Hermanas Mirabal are, who do not know what Dictador Trujillo did in our island. This is all evading them. And so when they go back to this motherland, looking to identify with the very things that makes them them, they feel like outsiders. They feel like they're not worthy. They do not belong because for so long they have negated this very crucial part of themselves.
Wonderful. Reverend Josue.
I think similar to what Father Jacob said, I regret. There was a lot of regret in that video. There was a lot of missed opportunities, missed dreams, or unreached dreams, and as Father Jacob said, wanting to have probably been back home in the motherlands, right? But not being able to because there was not work. And as she said, in New York, there was work. And so that's why she went, right? And so I also think that there is a longing for those who passed on before. And, she was referencing her mother, right? And I think that it all, the common theme, right, is I came here for necessity, but I regret it. And I wish that I could go back, but I had to do what I had to do for everyone else. And so I'm hopeful that, a lot of the generations now have been here. I wasn't born here, but I, basically raised here. But for the next generation, my nephews and nieces, they're born here. This is all they know, right? They might not see what regret is, right? But being able to go back to that, to the countries, and being able to tap into our cultures, and being able to see firsthand and experience firsthand what it is to live and to work and to feel the heat, the sun, how the sun hits you different when you are in the islands, right? How the food just tastes so much richer when you're in the islands. The differences in the taste of a fruit that you find there than what you can find here, even though they're the exact same fruit, the taste is different, right? And so my reactions to that is regret, not wanting to feel that regret, and hoping that the generations who are not even aware of what they lost, right, can find it before they actually feel a regret in the future of not being able to have connected sooner.
I think and then I'll go with Xavier. I am saddened at the generation that I'm seeing in front of me. I've talked this with Reverend Jacob several times. We speak up on social media about certain things that is happening in our communities. We complain, but when it comes to the activeness, the resistance, the perseverance, we give up. And I think that when I went to see this movie with my wife, I literally shed tears because I was reminded of how powerful and strong we Latinos are. And there is a consistent two words that you hear within her song: paciencia y fe. And I think that our community needs to be reminded that we are strong and we are built with resistance towards oppression, towards neglect, towards racism. If they could not kill us all years ago, they can't still take us today. That if we put our mind to it, we can do whatever it takes. And I had to deal with this within myself because no one is educated in my family. And as soon as I saw an essay paper, I would block. And it was the fear of failure because I was actually convinced that I was not intelligent, not intellectual. It was as soon as I met another doctor, my counselor, Dr. Reyes, who said, I know exactly how you feel. And I'm looking at him, but you have a PhD. What are you talking about? No. We Latinos feel the same way, and we got to break that. I started weeping. We are strong. We could do whatever we want to do. Do not get under the pressure of the hype. We are powerful. Xavier.
Yeah, so wow. Strong message. Definitely the emotions that it brings. I feel like it just reminds me of everything that I learned too late, I feel like. And I'll explain that. My grandparents from both sides of my mom and dad's families are the ones who migrated here from Puerto Rico. And obviously they were offered citizenship and offered things to come over here, as many of our ancestors were. Military was definitely part of the influence on coming over here. My grandma and my grandfather met in New York. So it's like very similar. The New York Rican culture is definitely all over there. And I'm from up north, you guys from up north. So you definitely can relate. And it's just that the power and destruction that assimilation can bring, to another culture is crazy, and it's hard to realize it until you start to see it in your own life. But you won't see it in your own life unless you look back. You need to look back at your parents and your parents' parents. And the whole video is just like pursuing that American dream, that was really like the dream that your ancestors had for you. You're the generation that your ancestors were thinking about when they migrated here. And that's every Latino story, because we're not from here. Every Latino came from somewhere else. Somewhere in your lineage, you came from somewhere else. Whether your ancestors were brought here as slaves or they made the decision to come over here for a better lifestyle. So in getting here, we take on the American dream as our own dream. And We try to strive for, having the income, having all the house with the white picket fence, and being able to live a nicer lifestyle than what we lived back home, or than what we were shown in the generations before. Every generation is supposed to be improving. Now, the emotion that it gives me is sadness, because I also see the kind of remorse of lost time, because at some point in your life, you think, man, I thought I'd be farther than this by now. And I feel like that's kind of the message that I was getting out of it too. It's like, you work your whole life, and you work for years and years to try to make something. But in places like New York, in places like, Hartford, Connecticut, where I grew up, Boston, Massachusetts, these inner cities that are very urban, a lot of times we see communities that do not develop. Latino communities, Latino and African American communities that are side by side, and they don't develop. They stay the same. There's no prosperity. Nobody owns property. Everybody lives on Section 8. Everybody has food stamps. Everybody has housing. But we came here chasing a dream that our ancestors had for us. And for us to stay in the same slumps, to stay in the same cycles, it saddens me. It saddens me because I have family like that. I have family that still lives in the same city that they were born in and raised in by my grandparents, who didn't speak a lick of English, and I have family members who don't speak any English at all and still live in those cities and have to rely on government assistance. And it's just that it just reminds me of the poverty line that is so real, and the economic inequality that there is in America. That is something that we have to fight through every day. And it's something that we do have to go out there and hustle and grind to be able to get ahead. And I think part of our stigma as Latinos is that a lot of us, especially in the Puerto Rican communities, and I will even go as far to say in the Dominican communities too, from what I've experienced and seen, is that we don't leave anything for the next generation. We give them the dream, we give them an idea, but then we don't leave them with any resources. And that is the major difference between a predominantly white community and a predominantly minority community, whether it's Latino or Black. We don't leave anything behind. Yeah, you might have grandma's house that she paid off and she worked for and she did everything for it. But you got 7 kids in that house, 3 teenagers, 2 toddlers. You got one that's not even a kid anymore and he's still in the house. And it's our own Latino communities that we, somewhere along the line, we lost the vision. We lost ourselves in the assimilation, and we didn't carry on the vision to own land, the vision to own our own businesses, the vision to be financially independent and not have to rely on the government. The very same people who oppressed us at one point as Puerto Ricans or as other ethnic groups, we've all been oppressed at some point. So why are we trying to feed off the very people who oppress us instead of building our own communities and feeding each other? So it saddens me, but it's a reality. It's a reality that we all
It's the tactic of that they've always had: divide and conquer. So they isolate us all. We all individualistically have our own visions. Everyone is focusing on themselves, and we don't think as a unit. We don't move as a unit. I was saying this yesterday in one of my classes, and someone got offended. The reality is I don't say it to offend anybody. I'm saying it from my personal experience. And we were talking about Martin Luther King Jr., but who were the main ones who were persecuting him? His own skin color. That's the problem. When someone rises to speak up for those who are being oppressed, those are the ones that get attacked. What happened to Moses? His own people that he is trying to free are the ones that are saying. And we as a people of color have to stop complaining about our Moses. We blame our Moses for what Pharaoh did to us, and we have to stop that behavior. It's just nonsense. And we have to speak as a unit. I just want to say this. I am so proud of this conversation and each and every one of you, because we literally just showed the world that there is at least 4 or 5 men that care enough to speak up with pride. My mother was an immigrant, but I am so proud of who she is. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. We speak with pride. Latina, Latino, levanta tu cabeza y brilla. No hay nada mejor que ser un Latino. Nada. Our food is the best. Our music is bomb. We are thebomb.com. There was a prayer that I looked up to conclude, and man, just please join me in meditation and listen to the words of this prayer. God of all peoples and nations, Dios de todo el mundo, we praise you for your creativity made manifest in the gifts of tribes, ethnicities, and cultures across the world. Each one bears your mark of goodness and grace. We especially praise you and thank you for your children with Hispanic heritage, the descendants of Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America. We find you in the beauty of their art, the joy of their song, and their commitment to la comunidad. We hear you in their call for a more just world, one of solidarity and liberation. We know you better because of the witness of their faith. May their faith and ours be bound together by your love in convivimiento, that spirit of unity and respect and empathy for which there is no substitute. Keeping all those Hispanic heritage in your care, hold them in your love, and make us fierce advocates and allies for welcome, inclusion, and the common good. We pray to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Bless you. Thank you, guys.